thanks to Donald Trump, this week he will get away with it. The outgoing president has pardoned those 4 men for their brutal crimes. There are only 4 weeks left of this Trump presidency. But what's so awfully unique about Donald Trump is that even till the very end, he never ceases to disgust, to horrify, to shock us. These pardons this week may be among the most revolting acts of a revolting presidency. To pardon people convicted of the murder and manslaughter of innocent civilians, kids like Ali, of what were basically war crimes, is sickening. It is, you could argue, complicity in those acts, an endorsement of those crimes, from a president who has never really valued human life, especially brown human life. Joining me now is Hina Shamsi, Director of the National Security Project at the ACLU. Hina, thanks so much for coming on the show. As you know, these aren't the first set of controversial pardons from Donald Trump for crimes committed in Iraq or Afghanistan. The president, a man whose only time in uniform was at a military high school, seems to equate military service with brutality. Last year, he personally intervened on behalf of convicted war criminal Eddie Gallagher, whose Navy SEAL teammates called him, quote, freaking evil. He pardoned Clint Lawrence, who was serving 19 years for ordering his soldiers to kill 3 Afghan men. And he pardoned Matthew Goldstein, who admitted to taking an Afghan detainee off base, shooting him and burying the body in a shallow grave. And now these convicted BlkWater Killers from Nisour Square. Hina, what message does that send to the world, to the US military, to Americans?
A disgraceful one. And President Trump has hit a disgraceful new low with these BlkWater pardons. You know, maybe I think it's important to understand that president's pardon power is broad and controversial pardons aren't new. What's new is the ways in which President Trump has used his discretion and powers in a number of cases like these. So, for example, you know, pardon powers can be used for remedying injustice, addressing a societal wrong or harm, correcting an overly harsh sentence. After all, our criminal legal system is rife with injustice and laws are overly broad, and the brunt of the unfairness and inequality falls on Black and brown people. But in these BlkWater cases, like the war crimes pardons around the same time last year, Trump is using his power and discretion not to correct injustice, but in ways that perpetuate it.
Yes, that is fundamental to what he's doing, and it's so brazen. And of course, Hina, you work at the ACLU, an organization that wants war criminals prosecuted, but federal executions ended. And in his last months in office, we have a president who's pardoning war criminals while ramping up federal executions. Another 3, I believe, scheduled before January the 20th. It's kind of horrifying.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As we look further at the unprecedented 5 federal executions President Trump's Justice Department is scheduled before Inauguration Day. On December 10th, that's International Human Rights Day, the federal government plans to kill a 40-year-old black man named Brandon Bernard. He was 18 years old when he was allegedly an accomplice to a murder of a young white couple. During his trial, his attorneys did not make opening statements. At the penalty stage, they called no witnesses. Out of the 12 jurors, all but 1 was white. Now 5 of the jurors say they think Bernard should not be executed. A former assistant U.S. attorney who helped secure his death sentence wrote in the Indianapolis Star, quote, "Executing Brandon would be a terrible stain on the nation's honor." That's one of the prosecutors who prosecuted him. On the day after Bernard is set to die, Alfred Bourgeois, another black man, is scheduled to be federally executed December 11th. As we reported, January 12th, Lisa Montgomery is scheduled to be the first woman executed by the federal government in nearly 70 years. The Trump administration has rejected her request for a reprieve. On January 14th, Corey Johnson, another black man, is set to be put to death. According to Johnson's attorneys, he has an IQ of 69, which means he's below the standard the Supreme Court used to determine if an execution would be cruel and unusual punishment. And on January 15th, Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, the federal government's expected to execute Dustin Higgs, another black man who was sentenced to die for his role in the murder of 3 women, even though he did not kill them, under the so-called law of parties theory.
It is very horrifying. And you said this earlier, but when I saw the news about these pardons last night, I was nauseous. And what's important to me to remember is that part of why there's such an outcry against these pardons now is because there's been minimal or no meaningful accountability for American war crimes and other horrifying abuses in our forever wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere. And in these cases, the US government had urged Iraqis to put their faith in the American court system. And an American jury found that these deaths were wrongful criminal acts. And what the president did is show a dehumanizing and callous disregard for the value of brown lives, like he's also done for black lives and the rule of law.
You mentioned a U.S. jury found these men guilty. It wasn't an Iraqi jury. And of course, we haven't yet talked about Eric Prince, the multimillionaire mercenary founder of BlkWater, who employed these men at the time. I interviewed him last year on Al Jazeera English, and I asked him about the jury trial, the jury who convicted his men. And this is what he had to say about the prosecution of his 4 guys from Nisour Square. Have a listen.
Prosecuted one of your men for first-degree murder, for killing Ahmed Rubai and his mother at Nisour Square. Yes, 3 other, hold on, let me finish. 3 other men were prosecuted for manslaughter. 4 of your men, murder and manslaughter, in not Iraqi courts, US courts.
That's right, and they prosecuted them 4 times, and they finally got a conviction. The first time it was thrown out for prosecutorial misconduct.
Guilty. They found him guilty.
No. The first time it was thrown out for prosecutorial misconduct. The second time it was overturned. The third time it was a mistrial. The federal government finally got them in a DC jury on the 4th time they tried.
DC jury, not a legitimate jury.
I would say a jury of your peers does not really compare to the rest of America. No,
Okay. There's this Trumpian, Princian view of the world where the law just doesn't apply to them. Court convictions don't matter if you don't like them.
BlkWater is notorious for the ways in which it has acted in multiple parts of the world. And during this period of time, I remember back in 2007 and this era, one of the big issues was the lack of accountability for private military security contractors, and BlkWater was the emblem of abuses because Nisour Square was not the only instance in which they were involved. And I think the disregard for consequence in human life is part of the tragedy, not just of what happened and the harm to the families and the victims, but also the harm more broadly now of the pardons and the message that it sends about what lives the president values and this country values and what lives it does not.
Yeah.
The Coomer character, who is close to Antifa, he specifically says that they're going to fix this election.
Let me ask you about this guy, Eric Coomer. I think he works for Dominion. He said, supposedly, don't worry about Trump. I've already made sure he's going to lose the election. Is that true for starters? And
yes,
it's true. You have that.
It's true.
In Coomer's case, he was in a position of power to actually act upon his rage against Trump and Trump voters. What does he mean when he says, Trump won't win? I made effing sure of that. Nothing?
And so now, yesterday, you filed this lawsuit. You're suing a slew of them for defamation. What do you want to get out of this?
Well, ultimately and primarily, I want to set the record straight and try to reclaim my reputation. But secondarily, people need to be held accountable. Their statements, their baseless accusations have real consequences. I am not a public figure. I've never sought out any publicity or limelight or spotlight, and I have been thrust into this by these accusations. And again, my safety and the safety of my family is at risk, and somebody needs to be held accountable for that, and the people that are in this filing should be held accountable.
Eric, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, that wraps it up for another episode of Stirring It Up with Tira Monique, Kitchen Table Talk. And I must say, we all love a good conspiracy theory every now and again, as long as no one gets hurt and no one gets dragged into court. You make the decision. Please let us know how you feel about this video in the comment section. And if you liked it, hit the like and subscribe button to become a friend, because there will be more to come. Until then, take care.